Hello, and welcome to Terry Bekart's GovCon podcast, where we discuss current government contracting trends, compliance matters, and best practices to guide federal contractors forward. I'm Brendan Halloran, a director with Terry Bekaert Advisory, and with me today is Lynnette Leidwinger, who is also a director in Terry Bekart's government
Hold on. Leidwinger.
Okay. Sorry.
Yep, get it all the time.
I'll just restart.
Yep.
Hello, and welcome to Terry Bekart's GovCon podcast, where we discuss current government contracting trends, compliance matters, and best practices to guide federal contractors forward. I'm Brendan Halloran, a director with Terry Bekaert Advisory, and with me today is Lynnette Leidwinger, who is also a director in Terry Bekart's Government Contractor Services Group. As part of our podcast series on topics for GovCons, today we're going to talk about subcontractor flowdowns, teaming arrangements, and compliance considerations. Thanks for joining me today, Lynnette.
Oh, I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about the topics.
Okay, great. So before we dive in, we're going to be obviously talking about subcontractors and some of the relationships. So just want to kind of frame the conversation in terms of, putting some context around, what a subcontractor is and, their role with a prime contractor. So really, prime contractor is the entity that has a direct contract with the federal government to perform on that contract for services, products, etc. And the subcontractor agreement is with the prime contractor, not the federal government. So obviously, there's a lot of coordination to meet the overall program objective or statement of work. But there's really some differentiation between those relationships. So Lynnette, we get lots of questions about flowdowns and requirements. And can you expand just a little bit about what are flowdowns and kind of what's involved there?
Sure. Yeah, because the subcontractor does not have privy of contract with the federal government, and the federal government will push FAR clauses to the prime contractor. Some of those FAR clauses will be a required flow down to the subcontractor, while others may not be. So it's important for the subcontractor to kind of understand what a flow down is and what the requirements are and whether or not they should actually be receiving that flow down in their, or FAR clause, in their contract.
Yeah, that's I think a question we get from a lot of clients is, they're being pushed a lot of clauses into the subcontract and really need some help understanding, what is required and, what should they accept and are there areas to push back. So definitely something that comes up a lot. And, also for the prime contractors having that clear understanding of,
Right.
Of their obligations. And so certainly, critical to understand.
Yeah, because sometimes a prime contractor will just push everything in their contract. They'll copy paste it, drop it into the subcontractor agreement, and it feels like it's an easy solution. But the reality of it is, even as a prime contractor, you don't want to do that because you might be giving benefits to the subcontractor that you don't necessarily want to, or there might be some timeframes that are you're required to report to the government, and you're not giving your you're not giving yourself enough time to get the information from the subcontractor and turn it around. So you really want to pay attention, even if it's a clause you're going to flow down. You want to make sure that you're reviewing it and making sure that you're not giving something to the sub. And as far as the subcontractor, they want to make sure that they're not picking up a requirement that is not needed in their contract and not necessarily required. And one way to do that is to look at the prescribed within the FAR clause. So, you can dig deeper into a FAR clause. It's either going to state it's a required flow down, or in the prescribed portion of the FAR clause, it's going to allow you to do some research that says, hey, this should or should not be something in my agreement.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one thing that, we see a lot of success with is, for companies to really, kind of maintain or build, some type of tool like a clause matrix. And there certainly are some tools that are, available out there as a good starting point, and really, spending the time with that to understand not only, what's applicable or what should be or what must be flowed down, but understanding whether you're flowing it down or accepting it, what is the requirement that comes from it?
Yeah.
In some cases it may be, yes, it's there, but doesn't necessarily trigger, some action.
Right.
But in some cases there may be a policy that's needed, or training, or some other requirement that, if you're not really understanding and keeping track of those, you can overlook them.
Sure, and a clause can take you to another clause, which can take you to another clause with requirements. So one of my favorite tools is a bar clause matrix. It kind of gives you a heads up as to what should flow down, what is in the prescribed, and it just kind of keeps you focused so that you can so that you don't become overwhelmed, which is really, even for prime or subcontractor, is something that occurs.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and and also based on the nature of the work and the customer, there could be some special requirements that that you're not familiar with, that are critical to the contract, and so sometimes those take a little bit of investigation or research to see really what that entails.
Yeah, each agency sometimes will have their own set of clauses. They can't be less stringent, but they can be more stringent than a FAR clause. So it is important to try to make sure that you don't accept it, and that you review it and understand, so that you don't have a gotcha in the middle of the contracting period of performance.
Yeah, yeah, and I think particularly for smaller companies that are maybe entering into a subcontract, I think that there's a little hesitation to push back in some cases, because they don't have that clear understanding, and so they tend to accept things that perhaps they
Yes.
shouldn't. And all of what we've just been talking about, I think, are just some kind of tools to take a step back and
Yes.
spend the time to really understand.
And it is okay to ask questions. I don't care how large the prime is. FAR clauses are not easy to navigate, and it's always a lot of interpretation. So ask, don't just blindly accept.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Great point. So another, kind of bridging from the kind of flow downs, another area that we wanted to talk about was, teaming arrangements. And, obviously they're, used extensively, and there's just a lot of good things that come from them, whether it's getting benefit of, past performance with a
Mhm.
partner, kind of leveraging customer program relationships from one of the partners in the arrangement. And, so sometimes it gives access to,
Yeah.
to contracts and programs. Sometimes it gives you, some past performance, or, gives you that, expertise, or kind of, niche, technical capability that's needed. So obviously they're, really beneficial. And obviously there's also a number of, things to consider with those. What's your, kind of experience, and, kind of what overall, team arrangements look like, and some things that folks should be keep in mind.
Well, teaming arrangements are a great opportunity for a subcontractor to really partner with a prime and get into a larger program. Sometimes a prime will have more than one teaming partner, so you want to make sure that your agreement is very clear as to your responsibilities. A lot of times, depending upon where the teaming agreement is written, it the terms will go directly into the subcontractor agreement. So you don't want to just kind of be willy-nilly with the teaming agreement because you're so excited to get on the team. You want to make sure that you look at those terms, and that if you're okay with them actually ending up in your subcontractor agreement, because that is usually what a prime will anticipate. You agree to it here, you're going to agree to it there. And it is okay to push back. You have something that prime contractor needs to make their team more competitive. So, you don't want to be grumpy about it, but you do definitely want to make sure that you understand that you are a good addition to that team. You're bringing something to the table, and you can be open and honest with any concerns that you have with the teaming arrangement. I mean, you want to be good partners up front, because good partners up front make good partners during the contract period of performance if you win.
Yeah, I think that's great guidance, just in terms of really kind of, going into it, and really, evaluating, everything about how that's going to operate. And, really, there may be some trade-offs,
Yeah.
I suppose in getting into that, but, obviously, whether it's the access or, future opportunities, there's certainly, I think a lot of a good to be had with them.
Sure. Subcontracting is a great way for somebody who's new in the federal environment to learn about working with the federal government. It puts more of the risk theoretically on the prime, because they have the agreement with the government, but it helps you learn how to navigate. And if you have a good prime, they'll navigate it with you, and you'll learn a lot from them, and you'll gain some good experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I know we talk with a number of clients, who are really in the, commercial marketplace and really looking to bridge, into government contracts, and that really is, just a great way to start to learn the ropes and kind of, understand, what's going to work well, and is it a good fit, for their organization. So definitely, I
Yes.
think a recommendation we make quite a bit.
Yes, because working with the federal government, there's a cost. It's not just to jump in, and there are compliance issues. You have to do certain things. You have to maintain certain systems and so forth. So, as a subcontractor, it's a good way to get in and test your toes a little bit to see if you like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, too. And, that kind of brings to mind, there's definitely, some, very large, companies out there that, have made, a strategic decision that they will never be the prime
Yeah.
contractor,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Hmm.
And they, definitely succeed and are very important to a lot of the contracts and programs they support. But, that's the position that they chose to, to move forward with. And so it's not not a mandatory to kind of move into
Correct.
the prime slot, but it really just depends on strategy and business goals.
Yes. Strategy is a big part of it.
Yeah. So, obviously, with all of this, we've talked on, some of the things around, where you're required to flow down clauses and some of the things that need to be considered there. There's obviously a lot of, just basic compliance considerations, that fall into play there. And that could be either as a prime contractor and navigating your subcontracts, or the subcontractor, being responsible to the prime. So some of the things, there that, again, these are, just a few of the many kind of bullet points that, we kind of help folks navigate and really kind of think through and make sure that they have them in order. Things like, are you doing your basic administration items, your SAM registration and maintaining that, accurately for any updates to the organization. You've got representations and certifications associated there. But, in some cases, if you're a, contractor that has multiple subs, or, works with a lot of vendors, you should, likely be thinking about, maintaining your own, reps and certs, so that you're doing
Yes.
that on an annual basis as part of a program. And so,
Yes.
those are just a couple of things that, kind of come to mind. Any others that stand out to you, Lynette?
Well, I know a lot of times reps and certs is concerning for a subcontractor, because they feel like they're signing their life away when they're looking at these, at the clauses within the reps and certs. But you really want to make sure you keep them updated, especially if you're small, because SAM also has the small business a portion of that you can go in and fill out, and contractors and so forth will be looking at that. So they want to see that you're updated, that everything in there is accurate, and you may get reps and certs as part of a prime contractor flowing it down to you specific to the program. And sometimes it'll ask you if you're updated, and other times it'll ask you to fill them all out again, specific to the program. So it can be overwhelming, but it's really just part of that doing business and making sure you're compliant with everything that the program is asking you.
Yeah. I know one of the things, it's, a question is, well, obviously to be a responsible contractor for to the government, and prime contractor, or vice versa with a subcontractor, is where where do these things potentially get reviewed, or where is a closer look going to be given to what you're doing as part of your kind of compliance program. And one of the areas that is obviously kind of a hot topic for some contractors is purchasing systems. And so if you get into some of the requirements around having an adequate, or potentially eventually an approved purchasing system, that's one instance where if the government were to perform a review, they'll dig very deeply into how you're what are you doing for your flow downs. Are your reps and certs current and complete, and what are you doing for what type of monitoring program do you have for subcontractors and vendors? So, all are definitely, fairly intensive efforts, both documentation and actually completing them. But, that's one instance where, having everything in order, doing it consistently is, a really good practice. And, you certainly don't want to have findings or issues you have to correct out of that.
Well, the best thing to do is have processes and procedures. Make sure that your vested parties within the company understand why you're doing things the way you're doing them, because sometimes it can be frustrating as a PM or another part of the company, and they don't understand that compliance issues with the federal government is very important. And if you're going to do business with them, you need to be compliant. So the best way to do it is to really sit down, make sure your processes and procedures are in place, that you validate those on the occasion to make sure that you're actually flowing through the way you said you were going to do it. Because usually I always find if I'm following what I said I'm going to do, I'm less likely to get in trouble than I am if I said I'm going to do something and then I didn't do it to the means that I said I would do it. So that's a key part of it. You can explain your process and procedure, but if you're not following it, the government's going to scratch their head and say, well, what?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's almost better to not have that documented as a procedure if you're not going to follow it. Yeah.
Don't over document. Don't under document, but don't over document because you think it sounds good, but then you're never going to do it, because that'll get you in more trouble than if you just didn't say you were going to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. That leads to lots of findings and issues. So for sure.
Yes.
Great. So we covered a fair amount of territory. Any final thoughts, Lynnette, on the topic?
No, just really, it's subcontracting is a great way to get into the federal government arena. Just, make sure that you're educating yourself, that you're looking at the information, and that you're asking questions if you don't understand. That's really, we all ask questions. We all come across things we don't understand when you work with the federal government. So you're not alone in that concern.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for sure. Well, terrific. Well, with that, we'll wrap up today's podcast, but thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to email Lynnette at lynnette.leidwinger@cbh.com, or myself at brendon.halloran@cbh.com. And please join us again for our next podcast.
All right. Thank you.